Let's watch a couple clips of Joe Biden speaking, as despite MAGA pretending he's riddled with dementia and cognitive decline to the point that he can't do anything, he's delivered another massive success abroad in the overthrow of the Assad regime, one of the most despicable and vile regimes geopolitically, of whom the family has controlled Syria for 50 years and taken part in things like genocide, torture, and more during their tenure. So I want to watch what Biden has to say and use this as a chance to discuss what he's accomplished.
After 13 years of civil war in Syria, more than half a century of brutal authoritarian rule by Bashar Assad and his father before him, rebel forces have forced Assad to resign his office and flee the country. We're not sure where he is, but there's word that he's in Moscow. At long last, the Assad regime has fallen. This regime brutalized and tortured and killed literally hundreds of thousands of innocent Syrians. The fall of the regime is a fundamental act of justice. It's a moment of historic opportunity for the long-suffering people of Syria to build a better future for their proud country. It's also a moment of risk and uncertainty. As we all turn to the question of what comes next, the United States will work with our partners and the stakeholders in Syria to help them seize an opportunity to manage the risks.
This is another weird one because, like with the massive hostage swap Biden negotiated recently, this is something that should just receive ranging bipartisan support. Any American should be for this and think that this was an amazing success, right? I mean, Assad is a guy who murdered his own population, civilians at that, right? To the tune of at least 250,000 deaths directly attributed to him and his orders. He committed endless war crimes like the gas strike in Ghouta, of which Obama failed in not responding to, in my opinion. I think that's when we should have put our foot down. But the humanitarian crises and atrocities committed by this man fill a long list. I would need a lot of paper, a lot of time to detail them to you. And despite this, we largely see MAGA glossing over this or not giving credit or even trying to actively discredit Biden dismantling the Assad regime, something that, again, has been doing terror for 2 decades. The fact that Biden has played a pivotal role in allowing for the overthrow of a ruthless authoritarian dictator should just be a success, right? This is, again, the guy with little to no retaliation launched a chemical attack against his own people under Obama, and then again under Trump and Khan Sheikhoun, I might have mispronounced that, and Biden was now able to force him out of power through strengthening our position abroad and weakening our enemies and his allies, where, again, he is another key ally of our enemies, notably Russia and then Iran as well, where this deals a huge blow to their standing.
For years, the main backers of Assad have been Iran, Hezbollah, and Russia. But over the last week, their support collapsed, all 3 of them, because all 3 of them are far weaker today than they were when I took office. And let's remember why. After Hamas attacked Israel on October the 7th, 2023, when much of the world responded with horror, Iran and its proxies chose to launch a multi-front war against Israel. That was a historic mistake on Iran's part. Today, Iran's main territorial proxy, Hezbollah, is also on its back. Only 12 days ago, I spoke from the Rose Garden about the ceasefire deal in Lebanon, a deal that was only possible because Hezbollah has been badly degraded. Meanwhile, Hamas has been badly degraded as well.
You know, it really does suck that Biden's unmovable commitment to Israel has allowed him to enable them to commit a genocide, because outside of that, Biden has a pretty strong foreign record that he may never get credit for from the left or the right just wanting to discredit anything he does, and the left, the stain of genocide, they're not going to want to give him much credit, where he's positioned America into a much stronger position objectively than we were in before his presidency. NATO is stronger than ever. We've re-entered climate deals, trade deals, built unilateral coalitions, been able to push back successfully on like the Houthis, on Syria, for instance. He almost single-handedly ended the drone wars. He got us out of 20 years of Afghanistan, while also weakening the position of our enemies, where Russia was seen as this grave threat just 4 years ago, where they've now been diminished as not worth our time pretty much, as the even weaker Ukrainian army has had successes against them just by using our weaponry, which shows, I mean, they really are no threat to us, right? While also continuing normalization talks with Saudi, weakening Iran in the region, managing to bring troops home all the while and out of combat zones. This is much stronger than, say, Trump's record, which is filled with warmongering, drone strikes, and unnecessary aggression while weakening our position abroad. I mean, just think about it, right? Despite him getting the anti-war kind of moniker, scratch a little past the surface on that, because under Trump, we directly funded the Saudi coalitions that did the Yemeni genocide. We allowed Russian attacks to go on in the Donbass without response. The Turkish-Kurdish conflicts exploded. We also made that worse as well. We expanded the conflict with Iran, and in Afghanistan, we dropped the biggest bomb in their history on them, while also losing U.S. troops to retaliatory attacks. We were pulled out of trade deals, out of normalization deals like the Iran nuke deal. NATO was weakened as a coalition, as Trump was always signaling, a break from these countries and supporting them and not having their back the way that Biden has signaled. So this leads to this downstream effect of, at least it seems from other countries abroad, like NATO isn't as strong, right? And they can get away with these kinds of escalations because of that, where Israel annexed East Jerusalem. This led to the March of Return, where Israel then slaughtered civilians. Trump responded to this by rewarding Israel by moving their embassy to the annexed land. The entire time, Saudi coalitions were again slaughtering Yemeni civilians, targeting their crops and fields. This is a war crime, as Iran is also building their nuclear arsenal like never seen before because we don't have these deals with them. You can see how through these things that, Trump conveniently leaves out when he talks about how he was so peaceful and anti-war and these 4 years were great. It kind of put us in a predicament in terms of our position abroad going forward, and it accelerated the timeline of these numerous new conflicts while expanding the existing conflicts he was handed. Yet somehow he's been the one that's branded as anti-war, which doesn't make any sense, because Biden is the one who has had actual massive successes in limiting our military presence abroad, strengthening coalitions in a way that prevents our troops from having to be on the ground in a way that we didn't have that security with Trump. I mean, Trump wanted to send troops into Mexico, send them into Venezuela, right? And bringing troops home, another thing Trump largely failed to do. So it's kind of weird to me how this bait and switch has just been allowed, to where so many people cede ground to the notion that Trump is the one who's the peace president and he's a conflict ender, when he didn't end a single conflict, and he objectively made all the ones worse that he was handed. Like, are we supposed to applaud him for being too busy with the 3 existing conflicts he had that he didn't start a new one? Like, good job, I guess, but that's kind of a weird pat on the back, especially when he made those conflicts worse, still got troops killed, still saw terrible things happening abroad and our enemies gaining power. And then the right will also try and incorrectly attribute Biden's support for foreign allies abroad, like his aid, as warmongering, which is like kind of weird. It's hilarious considering that if you understand the purpose of these things, military aid is typically seen as what prevents military intervention when we're thinking of how to deal with our allies or even curb our enemies, if we're talking about like sanctions and things like that. And the last time we pretended that we didn't have to give aid to curb the need for intervention or anything in conflicts abroad, we were drug into a pretty massive one, if you guys remember or have ever heard of it, World War II. So Trump and Republicans largely want to repeat these mistakes and push us into World War III, where Biden has actually taken massive strides in lowering the chances of this happening, bringing our troops home and strengthening our position and the position of our allies to make it less and less likely that anyone would want to escalate against us. But yet he'll probably get no credit for that. He doesn't get any credit for this. And that's just the dealings of MAGA.